Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful night tonight. Today, we're going to be talking about, well, AKs mostly, but also some interesting stuff going on in the firearms world. Lots of people closing down their doors recently. Today, we had another announcement. Another one bites the dust. But before we get into that, while you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as that is all free and it does help us out quite a bit. But now let's go ahead and get the fine gentleman here. We have Gary, and of course, the guest of honor, we have M26 Lemon Grenade. How's your night going tonight, sir?
Oh, I can't complain.
Good. Gary, how you doing?
It's another wonderful night.
Absolutely. All right. So, well, everybody knows who I am and who Gary is, but why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, sir, and just give everybody a quick introduction?
M26 Lemon Grenade's my online persona. I'm a Pisces, if that matters. I'm a pretty simple guy. I have a small YouTube channel that these days deals mostly with Kalashnikov content. So if you're interested in Kalashnikovs, head on over and see my very low quality videos. So fair warning, they're one take. I don't do any editing. I just roll with it. So if you're looking for high quality content, my channel might not be the thing for you. But if you want to learn about Kalashnikovs, there you are. Kind of my background, I'm not a professional, I'm just an enthusiast, but I've been dealing with Kalashnikov since 2004 when I bought my first underfolding AK in Iraq for $20 in a Maxim magazine. And you name the Kalashnikov, I probably owned it at one time. I've been building them about 8-9 years now. I probably got about 70 kit builds under my belt. So, while I'm not a professional, I have a lot of knowledge that I've gained just through about 20 years of experience.
Sweet. There you go. Awesome. That is a wacky way to start your AKs with a $20 Iraq build, basically.
Yeah, I was injured in Fallujah, and I was on the base by myself, and my gun was in elsewhere, and I needed a gun. So our BAH, Battalion Aid Station, had a room full of Kalashnikovs that we confiscated, and I gave a dude $20 in a Maximum for an underfolding Iraqi AK and 2 magazines. So
that's sick. Do you know whatever ended up happening to that gun?
I threw it in the lake because you can't take things back with you. So
right.
I just took the bolt and the guts out, threw it in this part of the lake, and threw the rest of it in that part of the lake.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say about your content, it may be simple in terms of like editing and stuff like that, but you're a very even-keeled, well-spoken person who can like actually explain things. And there has been, I actually came to know about you when you shared one of my posts several months ago about something else, but I had never heard of your channel before. So I went back, watched a lot of content, and is very mild-mannered, even-keeled content, just really strict, straight to the point type stuff. And there were some really vitriolic responses online to your stuff, and it was weird because there was a lot of people talking about, because you were talking crap about, products that they liked or something like that, but then actually watching your videos, they were very informational, very, they weren't like, my content can sometimes be a little bit more aggressive towards certain companies, and so I kind of understand why I might come off like a dick to some people. But your stuff was very well spoken, well thought out. It was, not overbearing or anything else like that. So it was interesting to see the difference between some of the vitriolic response online and then like your actual content, which is quite good. So I do think that people should subscribe to your channel.
Well, that's one thing I always found interesting. It's like people branded me as a certain brand hater. I don't know if you want to say the name of the brand, but
you can say whatever you want, but you don't even need to mention their name if you don't want to.
No, I don't care. I mean, PSA, people branded me like this big PSA hater, and it's like, I have 100 videos and 5 of them had PSA products in it. So it's, I gave other brands more attention than I gave them, but, just because of the cult-like following of that company, the Church of Scientology vibe that they give out, people just immediately, you say anything negative about that, they come at you with the talking points,
Absolutely. Yeah. That is something I've noticed as well, is I think part of it has to do with just that their fan base is huge.
Yeah.
Like probably one of the biggest fan bases out there. And so just like anyone, you're going to get a higher amount just by volume of people who take things a little bit too far in that regard.
Get crazy with it. It's like, I'm too old for that. I'm not here to start crap. I'm just trying to give, you know, just straight up facts. Like this is the fact with this product. I'm not here to crap on it. I'm not here to say it's crap. I'm not here to call you an idiot if you bought one. I'm just here to say, you know, this is what you're buying if you're a new buyer and you're trying to figure out if this is something you should buy. And that's always been kind of my point is, you know, there's not a whole lot of criticism of some of these cheaper brands. You know, whether it's PSA or it's Pioneer Arms or, you know, whatever, the Century products, you know, it's hard to find people being critical of those. So I just want to counterbalance some of the cheerleading, you know, turns a blind eye to some of the obvious failures. Like, okay, you know, here's a counterpoint. It's not built correctly and the bolts are shit.
No, absolutely. Well, and that's one thing that was really nice to watch your content, because I'm somebody who doesn't know anything about AKs. You know, I'll maybe watch a video here or there, but then when you actually go through it and you're like, here's the tolerance on this is why this is off. You can see right here where the material is starting to like mushroom away. Here's the problem, you know, and you actually go through it very analytically and tell people why it's either not designed properly, like even like rivets and stuff like that, which as an AR guy, I would never think about how a rivet was made, you know, ever. Right. But if you go, this is why this is bad, this is how they should do it, all this sort of like really good informational type stuff as to why something just isn't built properly, isn't, you know, from the ground up, isn't going to be a great long-term option. I think especially with the cheaper side of things is that people, one, probably tend to shoot it less, and so they don't notice issues as much. And then any issues that they do find with it, like we were even talking earlier today about some of the really positive reviews that have like really bad problems with them, but because it's cheaper, they tend to overlook a lot of the problems, right? And then somebody comes along, points out the problems, and it's like, hey, but it was only, you know, X amount of dollars, so it's fine that it has XYZ issue, basically.
Yeah, that's usually the counterpoint I always hear is like, you know, the firing pins tend to break in this gun a lot. Like, well, they're only $20. It's like, yeah, they're only $20, but, you know, this is possibly, as you put it before, a life-saving device. Do you want a life-saving device that is prone to breaking fire pins? You know, it's...
Yeah, when you say...
I would not want that.
Yeah, exactly. When you say a major parts failure, something that just takes a rifle out of the fight or, you know, just stops it from working, basically. When you say that doesn't matter, you're telling me that what you bought was a toy. That you don't care if it goes down.
And that's perfectly fine. If you bought it to be a range toy and that's all you expect out, perfect. But you know, there are guys out there who want to get into the Kalashnikov game because they want to use it to defend themselves. And if it's breaking firing pins randomly at 1,000 rounds, probably not a good option. Just my 2 cents. Maybe find something else.
Sure. I mean, that's an interesting thing too, because I remember when I was like really young and I didn't know anything about firearms, anything like that. I had always heard that AKs were more reliable. I could have been somebody that would have been easily pushed into buying a really cheap AK because I didn't know any better, simply because I had heard that, oh, AKs are more reliable, therefore I should go buy an AK, and this one's cheap, so it's a cheap AK, so it still has to be reliable, right? But obviously that might not be the case, and me being somebody who doesn't know anything wouldn't know that, you know, there's XYZ design issue with the product that you're buying, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's just so many nuances now, just because, you know, the days of the Soviet era surplus parts kits floating around the U.S. I mean, that's what the most of the like the Wassers, the original Wassers were, Romanian surplus. You know, Century hammering together Soviet surplus kits into, you know, acceptable guns. I don't want to say good guns. I don't want to say acceptable. And, you know, regardless of Century's build quality, you could throw them against a tree and they'd still run. But they were cheap because the cost of producing those parts was already paid by the Soviet Union.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they could sell a $300 Wasser and still make money. But now that those kits are dried up, we're relying on new production. You know, it becomes more nuanced, and that's just
absolutely.
You know, the $500 AK is not a good gun. I don't care who makes it. It's not going to be good.
Well, and you've talked about this before, but there are so many different like specs for AKs, and then like a modern American made AK might, like, the bolt might follow one pattern, but like the stem or whatever it is might be a little too thick, like an AKM or something like that. So there's almost like they don't all do it the same way. Whereas an AR-15, if you go to manufacturer Z or manufacturer A, you're basically going to get the exact same thing, with a few exceptions in there, of course, for like proprietary stuff. But different AKs, they take different furniture. They don't necessarily have that same level of interchangeability, and so when different manufacturers aren't producing them the same, it becomes much more difficult to know what the end user's actually getting.
That's more a critique of the small caliber Kalashnikovs. If you're talking the 5.45s and the 5.56, when you're talking AKMs, the 7.62 by 39, for the most part, everybody's spec is the same.
Okay.
And that goes more into you think, I don't want to get too far in the weeds. It's just an interesting point to me. You think about the AKM being produced in the mid 50s all the way up until the late 60s, early 70s. There was one spec. That was it. The Russians gave anybody who was even remotely sympathetic to the Communist Party, they gave them the data packs, they gave them the machines, they gave them everything they needed. So whether you're talking about an East German AKM or a Polish AKM, an Egyptian AKM, a Bulgarian AKM, it didn't matter what country, the specs were pretty much the same. So American companies, they like to buy Soviet surplus to base their data packs on. So it didn't matter what country they bought their their base parts from for their data packs. It was pretty close specs. Where when you get into the small caliber Kalashnikovs and to get into the politicals of it, think of the state of the Soviet Union in the late 70s. You had a lot of countries not happy with them, and the Soviet Union liked to use weapons technology as like bargaining chips. So if you were a good little Soviet satellite state, you got the premier, weapons technology to include small arms. So countries like Bulgaria, who were loyal, they got all the data package and the machines to make the 74. That's why the Arsenal Bulgaria 74s are almost identical copies to the Russian 74s. But you get into countries like Romania, who the Soviet Union didn't like because they openly opposed their annexation of Czechoslovakia. They did not give them the data packs. So they had to like make their own 74 type weapon, which was the AIM 74, which is a lot of the parts are closer to the AKM to the 74. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting stuff for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so like Poland, for example, they wanted the small caliber Kalashnikov, but Poland had always been problematic for the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union told them, you ain't getting quat. So they just made their own thing. They made the Tantal. So so when you're talking about the small caliber Kalashnikovs, American companies, whomever they got their data packs off, that's what their parts are based on. So that's why you get a lot of variations in the smaller stuff.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Well, especially now in the US, that a lot of the 7.62 by 39 is no longer cheap to shoot. You've seen a lot of the, I don't want to say necessarily rise, but a lot of AK like 5.56s and stuff like that. And so is that where you've seen a lot of the issues in that sort of not having a real spec to stick to so that everybody's making the same stuff?
Well, I mean, there's no, like the AKM was a universal military weapon for the Soviet Union. The AK-74, universal military weapon for the Soviet Union and some of the satellite states. So you have specs that are proven to work. The problem is there's not a whole lot of countries that serviced a 5.56 Kalashnikov. I mean, what do you got? You got Poland with their barrel 5.56. They service that. The Galil in Israel. You got the Valmets in Finland. That's it. I mean, you got the SIG 5.51, 5.53. You know what I mean? Like the Swiss. Those are serviced, but those are kind of a hybrid between the AR-70 and Beretta and SIG kind of collaborated on that thing, and it's considered a Kalashnikov, but there's a lot of departures from it. So there's not a whole lot of military issued 5.56 Kalashnikovs to go off of. So what we end up seeing is guns that are either adopted directly from the 74 or they are adopted from the AKM. So like, let's see, the Arsenal 106s their parts are almost identical to AKMs. The only thing different is the bolt face. The bolt face is 5.56. So you could take like the Arsenal 106 bolt and put in an AKM carrier and it works. That gun right back there, that's what that is. I rebuilt the PSA 101 and I had to use a Arsenal 106 bolt and an AKM carrier to get it to function. Whereas you take something like the barrel 5.56, was basically a rebarreled Tantal, and a Tantal is almost a direct copy of the 74. So there's just so many different. When you're talking AKs and 5.56, there's no universal spec. It's all just free flowing, man. It's just some of it's just complete garbage. Like the PSA 101, you had an AKM size trunnion and a 74 size bolt. For whatever reason, I'm not going to speculate on why they made those design choices, but it worked like crap. It's just terrible. But then you got companies like WBP, the Polish company. They have their own proprietary specs. They just like threw the book away and just redid everything. So they, their small caliber Kalashnikovs, both the 5.56 and the 5.45, are their own unique specs. So you can't interchange them with anything. It's annoying. It's like, well,
but did they end up with a better rifle that way though by going around that?
Yeah. Like the
both worlds.
No, the small caliber WBP guns, they break firing pins about every 1,000 to 2,000 rounds. So it's like, if you got a small caliber WBP, make sure you have about 3 or 4 spare firing pins laying around, because they're going to break. It's just a matter of time.
Jeez, interesting. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the thing that we actually have in the title. Let's spend 20 minutes just talking about AKs, which is awesome. I don't know. That's what we're doing tonight. We're just hanging out and chatting until we don't want to anymore, basically. So, but moving on to what we got up first. This is the Federal Trade Commission. This is interesting because, we're people that review and we talk about stuff. So this actually affects us a little bit. So this came out last week, August 14th, so 1 week ago today. The Federal Trade Commission announces final rule banning fake reviews and testimonials. But I'm going to go ahead and read out the first little section of this, and then we'll get to the interesting part. So the Federal Trade Commission today announced a new final rule that will combat fake reviews and testimonials by prohibiting the sale of their sale or purchase, and allow the agency to seek civil penalties against knowing violators. Fake reviews not only waste people's time and money, but also pollute the marketplace and divert businesses away from honest competitors. The FTC Chair Lena M. Khan. By strengthening the FTC's toolkit to fight deceptive advertising, the final rule will protect Americans from getting cheated, put businesses that unfairly game the system on notice, and promote markets that are fair, honest, and competitive. So I think that this final rule will go into effect 60 days from now. So we got about another almost 2 months from now, because it came out a week ago. But the final rule prohibits fake or false consumer reviews, consumer testimonials, and celebrity testimonials. So the final rule addresses reviews and testimonials that misrepresent that they are by someone who does not exist, such as AI-generated fake reviews. So basically, think about a new product comes out and it has, you'll see ads for products that have like 5,000, 5-star reviews, but half of them are fake because they made them. So that explicitly prohibits that type of behavior. More interesting to us is going to be buying positive or negative reviews on, say, competition. The final rule prohibits businesses from providing compensation or other incentives conditioned on the writing of consumer reviews expressing a particular sentiment. So they cannot provide any compensation or incentive if they have a particular outcome in mind, either positive or negative. It clarifies that the conditional nature of the offer of compensation or incentive may be expressly or implicitly conveyed. So they don't have to expressly say it. Even if they imply that the review needs to be a certain way, that goes against this rule. Now, if we go down, review suppression, this is also an interesting one. So the final rule prohibits a business from using unfounded or groundless legal threats, physical threats, intimidation, or certain false public accusations to prevent or remove a negative consumer review. The finer rule also bars a business from misrepresenting that the reviews on a portion of its website represent all or most of the reviews submitted when the reviews have been suppressed based upon their ratings or negative sentiment. So this is something that I think we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, about how certain companies on their website, they will actually filter out the reviews. So you'll see very few low reviews or low star reviews, let's say, because they have to go through a, what they consider a vetting process, but then they're almost all positive on their website. And this, it prohibits them from misrepresenting that the reviews on the review portion of their website represent all or most of the reviews. Because if they're filtering out all of the bad ones, they're essentially lying, or, in this case, almost defrauding their consumer by telling them that, hey, all of these are positive. Nobody has any negative experiences with them. So I thought that this was a very interesting letter from the FTC that didn't get a lot of play.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how much this is going to affect us in the gun space. I think this is more targeted to Amazon or Amazon retailers that are like, they'll, after you buy something a week later, they'll send you a postcard in the mail like, hey, give us a 5-star review and then you get this free thing, or here's a $10 gift card for giving us a 5-star review, or blah blah blah. I'm pretty sure it's more targeted towards that specifically.
I think definitely that's the bigger target, because that market is so much larger, like Amazon or any of the big online retailers. But it absolutely does affect the firearms world as well, because it's just a trickle-down effect, basically. Even if they're not intending it to hit people like us, it still is, right? Because it's a blanket ruling, basically.
And I mean, honestly, is this going to affect YouTube reviewers? Probably not, because you're getting paid for your time rather than getting paid for a positive review. I see several people, including the Humble Marksman, hi Dave, asking that kind of question. I don't think that it's going to affect the YouTube reviewers at all.
I would say, I mean, it has to be enforced too.
Exactly.
So, like if you think about counterfeiting as a crime, counterfeiting product. So if I make a truckload of fake Rolexes and I sell them on the street, somebody has to like file a complaint for them to want to prosecute me. You know what I mean? Like, I've talked to a lot of criminals, unfortunately, over the years, and they say the safest criminal industry to get into is just making fake products, because you can make them for pennies on the dollar, and unless the company is willing to prosecute you, file a complaint and get, the trade commission to actually, go after you, there's no repercussions. So the same thing, if nobody's willing to follow through with it, does it really matter? That's just my position on it. Yeah.
Well, GB Guns has kind of the same thought. He says FTC doesn't go after YouTubers not disclosing that they were sent something, so I wonder if this will ever be enforced. Yeah, that's always the issue. The thing that it does, however, is by having it in writing that this isn't allowed, this could technically empower somebody to actually go after them. Like, let's say they were trying to suppress a specific negative review. We've seen this in other industries as well. Companies have asked, like in the tech space, they've asked individuals to take down YouTube videos that were negative of their product and like threaten to take them off of review lists so that they won't get new products or anything else like that. Now, again, it would have to be enforced, but in theory, this ruling would protect them. Yeah. Humble Marksman, he says, I wonder how this affects the dudes who request a production fee. As long as it's not implicitly or explicitly for a review that, it has to have a certain outcome. Like if it's like, hey, I want $5,000, and then the company's like, well, I can't have a negative review for $5,000. That would be banned under this rule, right? But again, it actually has to be enforced. But it is just an interesting letter, and it kind of puts some people on notice. I thought it was interesting the way it pertains to us about the idea of frivolous lawsuits and stuff like that for negative reviews. So I thought that was at least interesting.
Cease and desist.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I've gotten a cease and desist. I know AK Quality Enforcement's gotten one, and you haven't gotten anything like that yet, have you?
No, I have quite a few people have told me, like, I'm surprised you haven't gotten one yet. And it's like, me too, but I'm
Right.
not complaining, you know.
I check my mailbox every day and it hasn't showed up. So yeah, that's to not have one than to have one.
I feel left out. I say that now it's probably being drafted, but you know, whatever, it is what it is.
Well, I wonder if this ruling makes any of those bigger companies think twice about it, or whether they are just, it's so difficult to enforce that they think they can just continue to get away with it, which is interesting.
I think it depends on the morals of the company. Like if I'm a company that has no scruples, I'm going to do whatever I want. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I wonder who's going to sue the FTC for this rule.
But who's going to sue the FTC
over this rule? Yeah, that'll say a lot.
Oh, I don't know, because if you sue the FTC for this rule, that kind of shows that you were participating in some of this behavior, right? If you're like,
you'd have to have a pretty shameless attitude to do something like that. I mean,
yeah,
that's just.
I mean, I bet this is a huge issue on places like Amazon, though, and stuff like that, for either AI generated reviews that are fake or, again, explicitly paid positive reviews, stuff like that. I bet this is huge in other industries. Andrew Vachon for $9.99. Thank you very much, sir. He says, even if the FTC were willing to go after less than honest content creators, this is why companies like Leviathan exist. More degrees of separation. Also, L&S is shivering right now. Well, no, L&S isn't doing anything right now. But Leviathan is interesting because it does sort of add an extra layer of protection to its clientele, because it's the FTC versus Leviathan versus the individual content creators. Oh, sorry, I removed that comment if you wanted to have that one up, Gary.
That's fine. It's
I saw
just
something about alternator.
Yeah,
it's talking about how Amazon's somebody got bribed into a positive review and then buying the. Oh no, there is no positive review. That's a warranty claim.
Yeah, that's a warranty thing. Sorry you got screwed out of that, man. Moving on to some other quick hits really fast. Unfortunately, Clayco, he just reported today that Kalashnikov USA, they are actually fully out of business. Now, if you've been following this for a little while, there's been stuff happening for the last year and a half. They were trying to get sold to different people, different investment groups, and apparently that has all but fallen through. So, as Clayco says, Kalashnikov USA, as we know it, is fully done. Whatever deals to have an outsider investor purchase this company over the past year have all but fallen apart. Even if something were to happen with this company in the years to come, the best employees there have all moved on. So he's going to have something coming about this, the rise and fall of Kalashnikov USA. But Lemon, you got any ideas or any thoughts about Kalashnikov USA?
They were, in my opinion, the best hope for decent American-made Kalashnikov. They actually had really, really good guns, good core parts, good build processes. I mean, I know AK Quality Enforcement, posted a bunch of stuff on, his page about it, but, again, they had a lot of potential. I think they were really wasted in their marketing. They focused their marketing on being cool and sexy rather than, setting themselves apart from the cheaper brands. So like if I'm brand new to the Kalashnikov world, I see a $700 PSA Gen 2 or a $700 Century BFT 47, and right next to it is a $1,600 Kalashnikov USA that has better core parts and a better barrel. There's nothing really telling me, there's no marketing, there's no information out there telling me why I'm paying twice as much for the KUSA gun. So I think if they just would have focused more on, explaining why you would pay more for that, I think they would have done a lot better. But none said they paid, retired porn actresses and,
Gary was just telling me that. I didn't know that they were doing that. So they were using some porn star for their marketing, like putting her on magazines and stuff like that. Yeah.
Essentially her name, her porn name, I couldn't think of the word, TBI, was Bonnie Rotten. So she was retired and she started off with I think it was like Gun Owners of America, GOA, being like a
she married to
Jesse
Wasn't she
James, I
married
believe.
to Jesse James? Yeah, and he builds
Yeah,
custom 1911s now or something like that.
yeah, you know, he is what he is. I'm not
Yeah.
going to comment. I don't know her. I'm not going to sit here and trash her. I'm just going to say that.
Well, it's just bad marketing
Yeah,
practices for
well,
wasting money, essentially.
essentially and Clayco put this best in a live stream he did about 2-3 months ago. The gun industry is a very conservative marketplace, and you know, you hired a former adult film actress, you know, whatever, I'm not judging, you know, but at the same time you allowed her just like unfeathered access to social media. So, you know, the conservatives in our midst would go after her, and she would like crack back on Instagram, things like that, like with no filter, no, you know, nobody holding the reins, and it didn't go well.
Right.
You know, so that was like misstep number one. Misstep number two was just, you know, in my opinion, they were just trying to make it sexy. So, you know, they were selling their guns with tracksuits for free, for Pete's sakes. Like, I was looking at buying one of their guns about 3 years ago, one of their 103 offerings, and you know, it included a tracksuit. It's like, I don't want a tracksuit. Yeah,
That's funny. Yeah.
I don't need a KUSA two-striped fake Adidas tracksuit. I got legit Russian ones in my attic because I am a Kalashnikov guy. I don't need your fake ones. You know, instead, give me more magazines. You know,
Right. That kind of seems like a little bit of like cringe influencer marketing. You know,
it is.
Graphic. It'd be
Do you
like
remember the mystery gun they did?
or
The
something.
what?
Do you remember the
Remember what?
mystery gun they did?
Mystery gun?
Yeah,
Mm,
They had a
can't say I
thing-
do.
they had a thing for a while where you bought a gun, and you didn't know what it was. It was a mystery box, but it was a
Oh
gun.
yeah, I remember that now. I was like, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. I don't
dumb.
want a mystery gun. I want to know what I'm buying.
Yeah,
You know,
no kidding.
I'm giving you $1,500 to $1,600. Tell me what I'm buying for that money. You know, that's what I want to know. I don't want a mystery box. I don't want a tracksuit. I don't want the autographed picture from a retired film actress. You know, I want to know what I'm
That's
buying.
a value add right there.
Yeah, I mean, how
Well-
dare I?
Our
Yeah,
resident
I
Resident
used their
Discord mod.
KP9 for a while, actually, but not one of their actual AKs, but their KP9. Which I had great luck with that one. That was kind of a cool little gun. But
My only complaint with the KP9 was the magazines. I absolutely hated the magazines. You know, I bought a KP9. It was actually a KR9. I bought the rifle variant,
Okay. Mhm.
and it came with 6 magazines, and 2 of them were broken right out of the box.
oh
And
yikes!
the bases were completely ripped out, and they were cool. They sent me 2 more, like no questions asked. But at the same time, that's not a good customer experience right out of the box. You know, you're buying, I think it was like $1,100 at the time.
Not cheap. Yeah.
Not cheap, and you open the box and the magazine's already busted. It's like, what if I'm wearing a chest rig and I do a nosedive with it? Do I got to worry about my magazine separating?
Mhm.
That's not cool.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky with mine. I think I got 5 with mine because I think I bought the gun came with 2, and then I bought a 3-pack or something like that. So I ended up with 5, and I didn't have any issues with the mags, fortunately. But that sucks. Hop says buying an AK as a primary fighting rifle is like buying a CZ75 as a carry piece. You
I
can
don't
take
disagree with that. Yeah, these days it's a very boutique rifle. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm an old Kalashnikov guy. You know, I remember the days of the SAR1s and the Wassers and whatever bullshit Century was putting together. You know, you paid like $300 for it, and you just rock and rolled it until the barrel fell out. You know, it's just it wasn't a boutique gun back then, but nowadays it's a total boutique gun. And
Mhm.
yeah, I watched his video that he did I think last year about trying to modernize it, and I think he put it perfectly when he said we're going to bring this into the 20th century. Not even the 21st century. That's how antiquated this piece of crap is. And he's not wrong. I mean, it's a design from the 40s. I mean, we can shoehorn it into the 21st century if we wanted to, but it takes a lot of money and a lot of know-how to make something like that happen. So I'm the type of dude that knows how to do it myself, so it's a little bit cheaper for me. But at the same time, John Q, citizen off the street, you know, it might not be a good option for you. Yeah.
Well, but like you said, you've put together like 70 AK kits at this point. You've been doing it for a long time. So, I mean, you have like real experience with the platform and actual know-how versus somebody like Hop, who doesn't like do that much with AKs, just like going out and buying one and then trying to figure out what works for it.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not only, you have the cost barrier. So you're looking at $900 in tools to start building. So if you wake up tomorrow and say, hey, I want to start building Kalashnikov, well, you better pony up about $900 in tools, even more than that if you count the drill press and the 12-pound press, the automotive press.
Mhm.
So you're talking a lot of money for startup, and then there's actual skills involved. It's not nothing is drop in for a Kalashnikov. It's all fitting. So I tell everybody that thinks about
Well,
getting
I mean,
into what's that?
It's drop in if you hit it hard enough.
No, I got plenty of stories of hitting shit with hammers that it doesn't work out well. Trust me. But it's just your first kit. Unless you got somebody with a lot of experience teaching how to do it, your first kit's going to be complete garbage. Your second kit is going to be a little bit better, but it's going to be complete garbage. Your third kit is going to be the first acceptable gun, and it's not going to be good. It's going to be acceptable. Back when I started 10 years ago, you get a Romanian kit for $200. That wasn't too bad. By the time you got to your third, fourth kit, it's not that bad. But now the kits are like $400 or $500.
Mhm.
That gets spicy.
For
In
sure.
a hurry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an expensive way to make some mistakes,
Yeah,
'Cause
and
you're
it's all about the mistakes too. I got a whole box I call the box of shame in my garage. It's all parts that I screwed up because I did something dumb. And it's so easy to do something dumb, but you learn never to do it again. Like I got one right here, as a matter of fact. So this is a trunnion. You see this little like slit up the top here?
Mhm.
Okay, this is because I didn't take a micrometer and measure the barrel journal. I just assumed it was good. So I got the barrel stuck about halfway. And once these things are seized up, because it's a press fit,
Mhm.
it's done. So you're faced with an option. You got a $150 cold hammer forged chrome line barrel and a $90 trunnion. Which one do you sacrifice? So this is my reminder: always use your micrometer. So this is a $100 mistake, one of many that I've made. So
That's a cool little paperweight to leave hanging around as a reminder.
yeah. So I keep it right next to my press, so that every time I think I'm just going to wing it and not use my micrometer, I see that and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use my micrometer and make sure that I don't make this mistake again.
Yeah, it's a little bit more tedious of a process than just slapping an AK or an AR together.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so much, and that's kind of why I've stuck. I mean, I've built probably 200 ARs. I've put together SIG 5.5 1s, 5.53s, things like that. I've built HK90 series, the HK91s, the HK93s. I've got a lot of experience in other platforms, but they don't hold my interest because once I've done a couple of them, it gets boring. Like think about ARs. Yeah, you could just slap them together, but there's only so many 4.5 pin and welds you can do. There's only so many 18-inch SPRs you could do. There's only so many retro guns you could do, and you're just freaking bored.
Yeah, I'm on build number 1200 and something. So
exactly, it gets boring. So it's like the Kalashnikovs, I haven't got bored yet because every build you do, something goes wrong. Sometimes it's something small, sometimes it's something big, but it's always something. There's always a rivet that doesn't seat right, or there's always a part that doesn't fit right. And I get into what I call hybrid builds or warlord builds, where you're taking parts from completely different guns and try to fit them together, and you're just you're trying to make them work. So the warlord builds really are fun for me because they might take up to a month for me to figure out how to fit these parts together, and then you fit them together and you're like, all right, this is cool, let's sell it and go on to the next project.
So you're a challenge guy. I'm
a guy that I want to make something that exists only because I thought it up. So
sure. That's cool.
I've got a bunch of guns like that, and I've had a bunch of guns like that. But the kicker is, you put your time, you put your effort into it, and then you get bored with it. It's like I made a 9mm Kalashnikov with a PPS 43 magwell. So I cut the magwell out of a PPS 43 and I retrofitted it into I think it was a Romanian Rack 9, which is like a $400 Romanian 9mm AK, just so I can run the metal PPS 43 mags, just because I hated the plastic mags from my KR9 so much. I was like, why can't we just use these metal mags that are almost perfect for running 9mm? So that took me about a month to figure out how to get all that done. And then about a month later, after I ran it for like 300 rounds, like, this is boring. Let's sell it and let's go ahead and fund the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work. So you had to like weld that guy together, right?
I had to cut the mag well to fit into the gun. I had to figure out the feed angle. I had to Dremel out the trunnion, because the trunnion in the Rack 9 was actually set up for a single stack mag, so it had a very narrow trunnion, and this is a double feed mag, so I had to widen it up, and I had to weld it. I mean, a lot went into it, and once I got it all settled in and it's running, and sell it, put it on Gunbroker, get a new one, get a new project.
I didn't know if you wanted to tackle this guy, but this gentleman seems to have an issue with you for the headspace issue. Texan 762 for $10. M26 Lemon, please acknowledge that you gave false headspace reading by hammering in the gauge, deforming the chamber, gauge, and trunnion. No real gunsmith would do that. So he thinks that you deformed everything by hammering the gauge.
So this goes. I recently did a bunch of videos about my PSA 101. Mm-hmm. I got to 600 rounds.
It ate the field gauge, right?
Correct. After every 100 rounds, I was testing headspace because the bolt was mushroom. I actually got the bolt right over here. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Go for it.
Hey, John, you want to pull up Gun Slaps while he's getting his stuff?
Sure. Actually, that's a great idea. So we are sponsored by Gun Slaps. You can get all sorts of silly stuff from them. So let me go ahead and pull that up.
The gremlins moved it. I don't know where it's at. But
That's
anyway,
right.
I actually sent you a picture of it.
Let me see. I actually have that up. Let me... Is it... which picture is it? Because I have them all here.
It's got a side-by-side comparing my bolt to Grant's bolt from like 2021, which is on his website and all that stuff. It's on his page.
Share this tab instead. Put that here. I will pull it up. Boom.
Yep, there it is. So essentially, look at all those beautiful pictures. Yeah. So essentially, just to point it out here, so my bolt is on my right. Mm-hmm. I think that was after like 500 rounds, I started noticing considerable amount of peening on the rotation cam, the trunnion, and the locking lugs for the bolt. So I started testing headspace every 100 rounds, and I tested with a field gauge because that's the max allowable headspace, right? And sure enough, after 600 rounds, it swallowed a field gauge. So if it can close on a field gauge, whether I, pound it in with my hand or not, it's unsafe.
Yeah.
So if you want to take the position that I deformed the bolt by, pounding it in with my hand, so be it. That's on you. You don't understand the safety protocols of testing a gun. But
that sounds crazy to me that you could, if you had the physical force to deform the bolt, by just using your hand strength, like
if you look at the video, I had the safety on.
Yeah, no, I can actually pull up the video for you.
Yeah, so I'm just saying I had the safety on, so I can't bring the bolt completely back. So I brought it back, let's call it half cocked. I put the thing in there and I sent it home, and I just pushed it in with my hand. That's not deforming the bolt. That's just pushing it closed with my hand. But hey, whatever that guy wants to believe, it's a free country, and Jesus loves you,
Yeah. Hey, at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
I just wanted to really quick shout out Osaka Sauce, watching us from freaking Denmark. I don't know why you're wasting your time with us tonight, but thank you very much. He's talking about other AKs like Falmets.
Look at that double chin I'm rocking there. I think it's amazing.
You look beautiful. Don't worry about it.
My favorite hater comment was somebody said, "Why is Baron Harkonnen telling me how to run my gun?" I was like,
"That's good.
That's insulting and wonderful at the same time. Thank you."
Oh, whoop, there it was. You missed it.
Oh,
See, look at this deforming the bolt. So you insert it,
Yep.
Drop it, 2 hits. You totaled your AK in 2 palm hits. That doesn't. That's live evidence right there. I think that guy's think he's off his rocker about that.
I run into this all the time. You know, like I said, you know, the cult of PSA, as I like to call it. You know, they got their hardcore fanboys. I'm not trying to insult anybody that, you know, has bought a PSA and you like it. If you like your PSA, I'm happy for you. It's good. But, you know, you got these cult-like followers that if you say anything negative about that company, they will just come at you with anything that they can find.
Yeah, 100%.
Anything. And it's just nuts. And PSA doesn't help. They put out a lot of bad information, you know, just try to explain some of the deficiencies in their guns. Like, let's go back to the rivet thing. I identified about 2 years ago that they weren't riveting their guns correctly, which is, we'll get into this a little bit later, which is dimple and using swell necks. And, you know, for a little while there, the response was, you know, I don't have the screenshots anymore. It was on my other phone, and I switched phones about 2 months ago. Their initial response, as I remember, was we modeled our guns after the Norinkos, which don't use swell necks or dimple into the receivers, which they are correct, but their guns aren't modeled after the Norinkos. They have a completely different rivet pattern than the Norinkos. So, you know, they put out this like tidbit of information that sounds feasible if you don't know anything about the platform. And, you know, dudes that are just like their diehard fans just run with it. I mean, they just go. Mm-hmm. I ran into this more recently. I was posting pictures of videos of my 101 failing before I fixed it with AAC ammunition. And, you know, there was this whole thing with, they told me I needed to put a ramp cut trigger in my gun to make those issues go away. I was like, that is preposterous. Like the ramp cut trigger, what the hell are you talking about? And dudes ran with it. I still get people DMing me on my Instagram about, you know, how I don't know what I'm talking about and I should use a ramp cut trigger. It's like, I have what I call the circle of steel, you know, the council of steel on my phone, which is professional builders. I'm not going to name drop, but they're people you would have heard of in the industry that do this professionally for a living. And when I put this to the council of steel, the ramp cut trigger, and the common response was, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So, mm-hmm. Nobody's heard of the ramp cut trigger until PSA put that out on their Reddit page.
Right. And I think that's people who are low information are going to hear that. And like you said, just run with it because they don't
run with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think you ended up trying it both ways, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a whole video on it just because I just wanted to show, like, I know how this works. You know, I don't want to. Yeah, good point. I don't. You know, when people put out information like this, and I'm going to continue showing a gun malfunctioning, I want to address those commentaries from the company. You know, I want to make sure that my position is firm, where the ramp cut trigger has nothing to do with these failures that I'm seeing. So I put in the non-ramp cut trigger that I bought from PSA and just marked it with a Sharpie, like, this is where the bolt carrier is hitting. It's not hitting anywhere near where this ramp cut's supposed to be. I ran it clean with the non-ramp cut trigger, and I ran it clean with the ramp cut trigger. It made no difference. There was no impact on function. There was no impact on ejection. They ejected the same pattern, the same place. You know, it's complete nonsense.
Right.
But again, if I don't know anything about Kalashnikovs, it sounds feasible. Like, yeah, oh yeah, that sounds like it could be it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. PSA says you need a ramp cut trigger. You had one up recently with the bent piston, you know. Yeah,
that was another thing where the piston was just way out of round, like a half inch out of round, right?
They just purposely bent it, you know.
Well, and then you were saying that's an old trick to get them to slow down, basically, right?
Yeah. So if you have like a severely overgassed Kalashnikov, I'm talking like the standard Kalashnikov port for 7.62 by 39 is roughly 4 millimeters. The Chinese Norinkos went to like 4.5 millimeters for whatever reason. That thing's a hoss. I've shot those things before. It's launching your shell casings to like Nebraska. It's sending them out there. So like an old school garage build tactic for you had a gun like that was you just bent the piston. So now it's dragging on the gas block and the gas tube, creating a delay. So it's
right
more force to take to open it up. You know what I mean? So
No, yeah, that's like twisting the gas key on your AR-15 so it drags on the inside of the receiver to slow it down.
Yeah,
That technically works, but you should not do that.
no, it's something I would do if I had a $200 Norinco in 1987. Yeah, it's not something I would do in 2024 with a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility.
Sure, and you're spending nearly $1,000 even on some of these cheaper guns. So, yeah, it's kind of unacceptable behavior. And then, like you said, they put out all this bad information, and then people just
run with it.
Yep, and then it never dies. It never dies. You're going to hear that forever.
I mean, this is going to be the last thing I say on it, just so people understand how infuriating this is. It's like people say, "You think you know better than PSA? You mean the company that's never riveted a Kalashnikov correctly in its history?" Yeah. I think I know better than them, actually.
Well, and it's the thing where you see a gun fail in a specific way, and it's like, it's not my fault that it failed. You know, they made it, so obviously they should improve it. You know, you're just showing what happened with it, basically.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be impartial. Like, I'm not trying to hate on anybody. I'm just, if you're going to spend your hard-earned money, and $700 is a lot of money for a Kalashnikov, in my opinion. You know, I just want to show you what you're buying. What you're buying is a gun that's not built correctly, and it probably has a bad bolt in it.
Right.
Now, this is an interesting one. I actually sent you a picture of this. This is the picture of the carrier. The guy's holding the carrier, and the ass is all like beat up. That's actually a Zastafa M70, I believe.
We pull this one right there. I think
that'd be the one. Yeah. So what he's talking about here is there was guys that were putting in ALG triggers and what I call the mousetrap spring. So ALG makes a upgraded spring that is essentially just a mousetrap. You know, I've had my fingers caught in those things, and I still got scars on my knuckles from some of those guys. They're pretty horrific. So what's happening? Guys were making this, you know, this change to their gun against manufacturers' recommendations, and they were doing that to their bolts and their bolt carriers. Now, Zastafa will really seek you out if you talk about this online. I've heard the stories. You know, the guy that runs Zastafa USA, like their marketing, you know, he's a pretty wild Serbian. He will seek you out if you talk about this too much on your YouTube. So I've learned not to mess with Serbians. So I'm not yeah.
So for the average person who doesn't know what they're looking at, is this the material on the back of the bolt here, like getting pushed?
Mushrooming, yep. Mushrooming.
Yeah.
So the first place a carrier hits on its backwards travel is the tail of the carrier. So the tail there, that's what actually hits the hammer and starts the backward motion to reset the hammer. So when you see mushrooming of the carrier, that's from poor quality of metal or poor heat treating in the carrier. The bolt, same thing. You know, the bolt is getting hit by the hammer, so that's a lot of force being put on the rear of the bolt, right? So if it's not properly heat treated, or if it has inferior metal, it starts mushrooming. So that's always been one of my critiques of the Zastafa products. You know, people telling me like, well, they're built like tanks. Look at that. That's not built like a tank. You know, yeah, it has a bolt trunnion. Yeah, it has a 1.5 millimeter receiver as opposed to the standard 1 millimeter receiver you find in most Kalashnikovs. Yes, it has a barrel that's about 20% thicker than a standard AKM barrel. Yeah, those are heavier components. But when I see things like that, that's not built like a tank. That's
right. So that's the actual carrier itself. That's a commercial grade. Those are commercial grade parts, and you're paying about $1,100 for that gun. Yeah, it's a step up from PSA in terms of price for sure.
It is, and it's a step up in terms of build quality, but you know, you're still seeing substandard parts. Now that picture, to be fair, was probably like 3-4 years ago. You know, I've heard about this last time was about 2 years ago, and then I'm not saying the problem went away. I just haven't heard about it.
Right.
But then again, you got a pretty stout Serbian shutting people down too. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is it does kind of suck sometimes when you run into an issue and it's been resolved since then. So, you know, we're kind of bringing up old stuff, but I mean, it's still important for people to be aware of issues that could be presented if they're spending, again, their hard-earned money on stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Nick for $5. Thank you, sir. He says PSA machine cut quality is frequently very bad. They simply do not understand all of the features on their CNC machinery, but think they do. And Nick, if I know Nick, he's an actual machinist. I think he is actually cutting parts while watching this stream. So he's probably ruining somebody else's parts right now.
Well, I mean, you did a thing on where you looked at Glassdoor of PSA as a company. I mean, I highly doubt that they have fully trained machinists running their CNC machines.
Yeah,
they probably have an operator level guy that's a button pusher, and he probably has a spec sheet he's following. X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Follow these procedures.
So I worked in the steel industry for a couple of years. We had 6 CNC machines and some like manual stuff that people would do. We only had 2 real CNC guys.
Right, exactly.
One guy who did all the parts, all the actual like 3D drawings, all that sort of fun stuff when we were doing custom parts. And if I ever had a question, I had to go to him, because the other 5 guys out there with him, they were literally pulled from like assembly lines, or they were pulled from like grabbing materials and stuff like that to push buttons on a machine. So they maybe had like a very basic understanding of what was going on, but they were not machinists by any means. And so,
yeah, I mean, I had a friend that worked at the was it North American Derringer factory. I mean, do you think those guys are employing fully qualified CNC now?
You would hope so, but yeah.
Yeah, this person was just a button pusher. They pushed the button and it spat out the part, and then they just put it in this bin over here to go somewhere else. That's
yep. And then
imagine PSA is the same setup, and that's not a knock on them. I'm not saying they should have like the CNC machinists everywhere. Let's be reasonable, but at the same time, they should have some sort of quality checks in place to find the totally out of spec parts.
Yeah. And that's what QC is for. Then we read stuff from their QC managers, right? There were some people that I've talked to that, have done stuff like that. And it's horror stories of what they did to pass parts, basically. It was like anything they could do to get a rifle to go and then ship it out the door. And it's like, this is not a product that should have ever gone anywhere, right?
And I don't want to just pick on PSA. That happens at all the budget gear.
100%.
No, it doesn't matter if it's Clash Costs, ARs. They're all the budget guys are doing whatever they can to keep the price as low as possible. So I don't want to make this like a PSA, hating session. All the low quality guys do it. It's just the nature of the business.
That's one of the ways to cut corners, is to, instead of paying a real machinist, 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour, you pay somebody 20 bucks an hour, or even less in some cases. And to him, it's a pay raise, right?
Yeah.
Uncle says he can confirm, as a current machinist, we have about 3 guys in the shop who actually do the work: programming, setup, and tooling. Yeah.
I got a question for you really quick. What are your opinions on AK pattern non-AKs like the Valmet, the VZ58, and the Galil?
So
that's a long discussion.
My opinion on 5.56 Clash Costs in general is, what's the point? If you're going to use 5.56 for whatever reason, just get an AR. I don't see a point. There's a reason the Israelis stopped using the Galil, because the AR was cheaper and a better fit for their uses. The Finns still use the Valmet just because they can make them. They're the Finns. They're not really supplying like a large army, but I just don't really see the point of a 5.56 Clash Cost in general. That's just me. I know guys love them. I know guys like to tell me all the time about how stupid I am for not liking 5.56 Clash Cost, but I just don't like them.
Yeah, well, I think probably most people would agree that 5.56 out of an AR just makes sense. It's designed around that caliber. It works perfectly. I've messed around with 7.62 by 39 ARs. It doesn't work all that great.
I hate those so much.
The bolts don't work well because the bolts were never designed to run that big of a case. And in the AK, it's like the opposite, right? It works perfectly for 7.62 by 39. If you want that caliber, go for an AK. Don't try and put it into something else. But putting 5.56 in there, well, now you have a gun that's at least a pound heavier.
Yep.
Now it's more expensive. It's probably less accurate, though there's going to be some variation in there, and it's way harder to do the thing that you want it to do. So
But
I think a
nobody
lot of
can
people
talk
like
about
AKs and they like the looks of AKs, right? And so they're like, okay, but I can shoot 5.56 through it, so it's just like my ARs.
Just
But it
get
doesn't
another AR.
yeah. But I think people have this like anti-AR syndrome where kind of like you said, you get bored of something.
Get bored with
So
it, yeah.
you got to do something new. You got to do something new. And so you're still using 5.56 because that's what you have stockpiled. 7.62 by 39 is a little bit more expensive now. So you move on to something else that's kind of like a fun project. Is it like a realistic, like go to war gun? Like, why would you?
And that's the thing. Like some people have that mentality that, yeah, ship kicks off, I'm going to take my barrel and, take care of business. Like, are you? If your firing pin breaks, your extractor breaks, you need some sort of replacement part. You're not going to find a barrel firing pin anywhere. And this is something that, me and Clay talked about, before, is he's a competition shooter. He
Absolutely.
shoots competition and he prefers the Kalashnikov platform. So he has 5.56 Kalashnikovs. I get it. That makes perfect sense. But,
Yep.
I remember AK Mario, who's for people who don't know, he's pretty big deal in the Kalashnikov side of the house. He said it perfectly. It's like, I love Kalashnikovs. I shoot with Kalashnikovs, but there are ranges I go to that need fragmental ammo. You think I can get fragmentable ammo in 5.45? It's just not happening. So he has to run 5.56 if he wants to use the Kalashnikov platform in a competition setting. It's just what you have to do, and I totally respect that. But I'm not a competition shooter. I look at everything as like practical defense. You're not going to. It's not a practical weapon to defend yourself. A Kalashnikov 5.56. It just isn't. But Gary, you were starting to say something. Were you asking?
I was going to say nobody complains about 5.45, and that's essentially Russian 5.56.
Well,
again, designed for an AK platform.
Yeah, again, it all comes into the shape of the case. So I got a lot of shit for this a couple weeks ago. I said the 5.56 is a straight wall case. What I should have said is a straighter wall case. So when you look at the internal geometry of the Kalashnikov, it was designed for the tapered, by 39 case, right? So, there's a pretty steep angle to feeding a Kalashnikov, and that steep angle is really designed for the taper of the by 39 case. We're talking 7.62 by 39 or the 5.45 by 39. So when you go to the straighter wall case, let's use that nomenclature so nobody like jumps over my shit again. When you go to the straighter wall case, you're changing the feed angle. It's almost like a 45-degree angle going into the chamber, right? Just because of the height of the magazine versus the chamber. So it's literally going like that. So you're changing the feed angle to something it's not meant to do, and it really takes a hit on reliability. I mean, can you make it work? Yes, absolutely. We've seen guns work. The Glial works. The barrel works. People can make the 106s work. You can make it work, but it's just the fact that you're shoehorning this round that's not supposed to go in there into the gun just so that you can look cool on Instagram.
So what
is that really what you want to base your defense around? Your personal defense around?
So what I'm hearing from you is that we should have AKs in 6.5 Grendel and 50 Beowulf, as opposed to 5.56.
If you makes you feel good, do it. I mean, Brandon, he's got a Beowulf 50 that he calls the 50 Light, and it's a piece of shit. Zach's a friend of mine, and he built that thing, and Zach will tell you that thing's a piece of shit. So, I had somebody like 6 months ago ask me to build him like a 6 arc AK, and I was like, go fuck yourself. I'm not doing it. Like, that's going to be a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of headache, and you're going to hate what I give you. So I'm not doing it. But I used to have a video up where I bought an M90, Zastafa M90. Thing cost me, I want to say $1,600 because I bought them when they were relatively new, and I hated it. It was a 4 MOA gun. It was completely out of balance. It was heavy. It was a pain in the ass to mount any kind of optics. And then I put it right next to my Daniel Defense SPR that I bought for $1,600. It was like almost 2 pounds lighter. You could actually mount optics to it. It was 1 MOA gun, same money, same, caliber, same length. They're both 18-inch barrels. So there was actually no practical reason to get an M90 over just an off the rack AR. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if people want to like die on that hill that 5.56 AKs are fantastic, run with it, brother.
No,
Jesus,
I'm on your side on this.
Jesus loves you.
I'm just curious about non-AK AKs. That's all. Non-communist AKs. There we go.
Tyler K has a question about 224 Valk AK.
I don't know what that is. That's beyond my scope of experience.
Yeah. That's where. Before we move on to more AK stuff real fast, Andrew Vachon for $9.99 said, what AKs are worth buying in 2024, if any? I have never liked the platform and viewed it as cool. Cool milsurp. But for those who are interested, where should they go?
You should go into your time machine and travel to 2007. And I mean, there's really no good options right now, unfortunately. This is something that I talk to people on my Council of Steel about. It really is a barren market. The best option right now, and just to try to explain the mentality here, is I always look at core parts first. You can fix everything on a Kalashnikov except the core parts. When I say core parts, I'm talking trunnion, bolt, and carrier. If you have a shitty trunnion, a shitty bolt, a shitty carrier, that gun sucks. There's nothing you can do. I could fix rivets, I could fix barrels, I could fix the finish, I could fix mag wobble, I could fix just about anything on that gun except a bad trunnion, a bad bolt, and a bad carrier. So unfortunately right now, the only gun that I can think of that's not extremely expensive with good core parts is the Wasser 10. The Wasser 10 is your best option. You can still pick them up on Gunbroker for like $750. You can get the RH10, which is the exact same core parts of the Wasser, just a different barrel setup, for like $650. So unfortunately, that's going to be your best option. There's other things in its price bracket, like the Century BFT 47. There's issues with the heat treatment. It has like a surface heat treat. So you'll be good for about 5, maybe 10,000 rounds, and then you'll start to see the mushrooming and losing headspace. So there's not a whole lot of longevity with that gun. The PSAs are just, don't touch those. The bolts are terrible. It doesn't matter if it's large, small, small caliber Kalashnikov 7.62x39. The bolts are absolutely terrible. It's a crapshoot. I've got no way to quantify this, but if I had to wager, I'd say, do you have about a 25 to 30% chance having a bad bolt? People will say, like, well, just use a lifetime warranty. Like, I just spent $750 on this. Should I have to use a lifetime warranty within 500 rounds?
Yeah, or use it like once every year for the rest of your life until the company goes out of business. I hate the lifetime warranty defense, because the warranty is great. You should have a warranty. Things are going to go wrong, little things here or there, right? Of course, having a lifetime warranty is great. You shouldn't depend on that to get a working firearm.
If it's a selling point, I would be dubious of that product, whether it's a firearm like PSA or if it's like an optic like Vortex with their lifetime warranty. If it's a selling point for you to get you to buy it, don't buy that product. Right. They're basically banking on you. You should bank on that product to fail. Mm-hmm. And like we talked about, if it's a range toy, fine. But if it's something you're seriously going to defend your life with, you don't want that thing to fail when you need it most. Mm-hmm. So, the firing pin just broke and you're in a gunfight. That's no bueno.
Yeah, right. Guess what?
Yeah, you're not filing that warranty claim.
Yeah, Game Night says lifetime of the company warranty. That's right.
So this is unrelated, but back in 2009, when the financial collapse was happening and all the car companies had to be bailed out, I remember one of my guys where I worked at, he was excited because he was getting a Dodge Charger. Like they're throwing me lifetime warranties. They're throwing me like unlimited powertrain services. Like, yeah, if the company stays in business,
right?
He just couldn't make that gap. That, well, it's lifetime warranty. Like, yeah, if the company stays in business, but it's for life. The life of the company, like he just couldn't bridge that gap. Yeah,
because that's the thing. Like, we just saw 2 other companies go out. Adams Arms is now, they're closing their doors. They just got sold to their creditors. And then Polymer 80 is
Oh,
they're
really?
getting sued out of existence. Yeah, there were another. We were going to cover that, but we don't need to cover it. But basically, they were also closing their doors, and they had people who had like big orders or warranty issues, stuff like that. And for right now, they might come back because they're trying to sort through all their legal troubles, which is awful because they're kind of getting sued out of existence. But
Their buildings for sale, at least allegedly. I've tried to find it. I can't.
yeah,
I looked through all
that's a
real
rough
estate
situation to anyone who's relying on their warranty. But it is funny that you mentioned the BFT 47, because at the end of the show, I was going to ask you, because I got a local gun store and I was just going to go there and buy an AK basically to get my first AK. And they have the BFT 47 down there for $800. Still more expensive, but
no, I would just go on Gunbroker and get an RH10.
RH10. I'll write that down.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to get into this now or a little bit later, whenever you want, but
we'll do it a little bit later because I do want to move on to like basic stuff.
Yeah,
but,
no problem. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so let's get to the main topic of discussion, even though we've been talking about AKs for an hour now. That's going to be what to look for when getting into AKs, because like myself, I've shot some AKs here and there. I've shot some PSA AKs. I've shot some really crazy like $3,500 custom AKs that were kind of wacky, but I don't really know what I'm looking for. So when I see a rack of AKs at my local gun store, the differences between them are nebulous to me, right? Because I just don't have a good starting point.
Definitely look at the rivets. That's it's some of the obvious stuff. So if you have upset rivets, I wouldn't touch it. But it's hard. The riveting is hard to see too because, as we talked about the dimple and swell necks. Yep, there it is. So what you have there, that graphic on my left, that's the difference between a flathead and a swell neck. So a flathead rivet is simply just you have two pieces of metal and you're just using a rivet to pinch it together. Now, the one on the right, the swell neck, that is one to where you have in the trunnion a 45-degree chamfer, and you've actually physically pushed the receiver down into that chamfer, and you're using that swell neck to fill that void. And I'll try to explain what I'm talking about here. So,
well, I think what that does, just from somebody who's done a little bit of machining and stuff like that, that increases the surface area quite a bit, the actual contact, and it removes a weak point where the flat angle would be, right?
I have a visual aid if you want to blow me up on your screen here.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So real quick, I'll try to keep this as quick as possible. All right. So these are scrap parts. This is just a receiver. This is a trunnion. So this is 1 millimeter sheet steel, and what's taking all the force is the trunnion that's front and back. So you have a front trunnion where the barrel goes. You have a rear trunnion where the stock goes. So when this thing shoots, if you've ever seen it under slow motion, it just flexes like a rubber band. It goes blue, 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 blue. So when you are shooting this thing with only flatheads, not swell necks, this trunnion wants to move independently of the receiver. So it's just kind of flexing back and forth like that, right? So just having all flatheads on it, you're putting undue stress on those rivets because this trunnion is moving independently of the receiver. It's not moving with the receiver. But this is an example of find my camera. See how that's chamfered down? It's a 45-degree chamfer. Okay, so you physically push the 1 millimeter sheet steel into that, and it marries the trunnion to the receiver so that when it flexes, now if that's pushed down in there, the trunnion is flexing with the receiver, not independently of the receiver. If that makes sense. I hope it does.
Yeah, no. That makes a lot of sense because you're actually physically pushing the metal, the 1 mil, 1.5 mil, whatever it happens to be, into the trunnion so that it has perfect contact, right?
Correct. So it's locked into the receiver, so it's flexing with the receiver, and then you're using that swell neck to fill the void. And that's one of the pictures I sent you is what happens even if you have that dimpled in and you don't use the swell neck, if you're just using a flathead anyway. I think if you scroll over one more, yep, that's one. So you still have movement of the trunnion block in the frame, but if you just have a flathead, you don't have something filling that void, it's going to shear off anyway.
Interesting.
So when you're talking about rivets, you want to make sure they look good, meaning that they're not upset, they're completely flat, crushed, all that stuff. But you can't see it, but you can see a little bit of like pushing in around the key rivet points, which the key rivet points on my example here would be this rear one here and the rear trunnions. So you kind of need an eagle eye to see that stuff. You got to really know what you're looking for.
Is there a way to just know what manufacturer is actually using these swell neck rivets?
For the most part, imports are. So like if you buy a WBP, which is a Polish commercial brand, that goes for about $1,000. I'm pretty sure they are. Wassertens, they're definitely doing it. I haven't had my hand, I haven't torn apart a BFT 47, but I'm told that they are using proper procedures. Now, Pioneer is an import, which is a very low budget import. I tore one of their guns apart. I tore apart 3 of their Pioneer Arms 5.56s just to like rebuild them. And for some reason, they dimple and use swell necks on the rear trunnions, but not the front trunnion, which makes 0 sense to me.
Yeah, the opposite way.
Yeah, it's I don't know, but the Pioneer Arms, I would definitely stay away. The PSA right now, don't do it. I've heard a lot of rumors saying that they're going to start. I've heard, I've been looking for like a public announcement. I don't think they're going to make something like that public, but I've heard from a couple different sources that, they've told them at trade shows like SHOT Show and stuff like that, they're going to start dimpling and using swell necks, which is great, fantastic. So,
well,
I hope they do. But
absolutely, that could be almost disadvantageous to do that though, because think about how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of PSA AKs they've pushed out. And then to be like, hey, by the way, 6 years later, we just fixed our AKs. So everybody else who bought one previously, sorry, I guess.
Well, somebody posted it on YouTube as a community post. And they tagged me in it. They reached out to their customer service and said, hey, is my gun's not dimpled? Are you going to do it? And they responded like, we've never done that. We have never done that. We're not going to warranty it. So they've acknowledged somewhat publicly, like in communiques through their customer service to customers, that they don't dimple use swell necks. But I don't know, like I think they're just going to like make a Gen 6 and on the down low just kind of start doing that. So if you haven't bought a Gen 6, you're shit out of luck.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is in the next 5 years, PSA can make a good AK.
Now, let's be completely fair. So broken rivets are a long-term problem. So I've had a Gen 3 that I had 7,000 rounds on, and that was before I rebuilt it, and I did not see a broken rivet. So some of those guns, even with flat heads and no swell necks, can go a long time before they break rivets. But I've also had people send me pictures of broken rivets after like 1,000 rounds.
Right.
So, it's a guessing game. You're gambling. You're not following, AKM spec, and you're just basically gambling.
Right. Hob says the number one thing you guys are forgetting is that nobody shoots. If you round to the nearest significant digit, 0 people will have that issue.
And I say that all the time. PSA makes guns for people that are going to shoot 5,000 rounds in the lifetime of that gun. Mm-hmm. If you're the shooter that's only going to put 500 rounds on that gun a year, that 5,000 round gun is going to last you 10 years. But like me, I put 100 rounds a week on a gun. Sure. I'm gonna reach that 5,000 round mark in like a year.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you want something to take to the range on 4th of July and mag dump into some trash, that might be the gun for you, but it's not the gun for me.
Yeah, because I know family members who they own a lot of guns, but they only shoot a couple of them a couple times a year. So we're talking like maybe 500 rounds on 5 different guns. And these are like gun guys, right? They'll talk about guns, they'll buy different guns, but yeah, they don't actually go out and shoot that much. So, yep, kind of unfortunate in that regard. So that is kind of the what to look for. Now, what else? That
was just rivets.
Yeah, that's rivets. Well, because we have this picture up.
I would also, if you're going to buy and sell a lot, I would definitely take a look at the bolts. So again, this is a PSA bolt, but I don't want to pick on PSA. People have been sending me photos of this with Pioneer Arms 5.56 guns as well, to where you have the firing pin not stopping where it should. So the internals of of the Kalashnikov bolt is kind of tapered for the firing pin, so it stops at a prescribed point. So if that geometry is not correct, the firing pin will keep pushing forward and forward and forward, and then pushing the metal out, making the hole bigger, until eventually that firing pin is physically punching holes into your primers, and dragging material back into your firing pin channel. So if you're buying a used, especially a PSA, if you're buying a used PSA and you take a look at the bolt face and it looks like Jenna Jameson's Snatch, I would not buy it. I mean, if it looks huge and beat up, I would stay away from it, because that's just a problematic gun.
And is that just a heat treat issue? Like, so our import kits, or just import like Romanians, Wassers, whatever they happen to be, they're just better parts? Like the base material is better, the heat treat's better?
I don't have any kind of like equipment to test that, but I would say it's more just the internal geometry. Because if you don't machine that firing pin channel to the correct specs, if the specs are off, you're going to get that. It's just the way it is. But again, that's just my guess. I don't have any kind of equipment to test anything. I can't test metallurgy. I can't use an ultrasound. What's that with the babies?
Or the ultrasound, or what are you talking?
Ultrasound, yeah. I can't use an ultrasound to take a look at the internals of the firing pin. I don't have any of that capability. So yeah, that's just my best guess. But it is a problem that's happening, and it's happening more prevalently on their small caliber Kalashnikovs. And it's been happening for years, and it's not going away. I first heard about it in 2021 with Grand Thumb had a AK-74 video. Where he showed all the stuff. Yeah. And, they came back a year later with a, hey guys, it's fixed, high fives. And I saw it, I think August 13th is when July 13th, I saw it on a brand new 101 gun. So it's not fixed.
Right.
So that's kind of my point is, is you get in the cheaper guns, it's a crapshoot. Is it going to last longer than 1,000 rounds? Who knows? But that's something to look at. Look at the bolt face. Get yourself a field gauge. If you're, they usually run about $35 for one of the cheaper ones. If it can make sure it doesn't close on a field gauge so that you have proper headspace, things like that.
The field gauge guy is actually back. This is Texas 762 for $10. He says, back, I'm not a PSA fan at all. Gunsmith procedure for head spacing is to gently insert the gauge to try and put a bolt in battery. Canting force is easily enough to deform soft barrel steel with a hardened gauge.
So you're telling me that the force of my hand was enough to deform nitrided steel?
Yeah,
is that your position?
If you were using a hammer, I think maybe there's more of an argument. But now let's say headspace got bad after 600 rounds, right? So let's say after 700 rounds, it just fell right in there with no issues. Like, who cares? Right. So whether it failed at 600 rounds or it failed at 650, 700 rounds, it doesn't really matter. The point was it was going out.
See, this is why I don't have my comments, because yahoos like this would be jumping in my shit all day trying to argue with me with this nonsense. He knows he's wrong. Like, I mean, he knows he's wrong. He just doesn't want to, his pride is just not letting him, give up on it, and this is the kind of guy who's going to get so mad at me because he knows he's wrong that he's going to, do something stupid, like show up at my house or something. So,
well, he's already sent me $20, which I do apprapprate. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he sent you $20 just to tell me that I'm full of shit.
You, right? Not even me. Me. I don't even exist in this conversation.
Look, I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying, if I can close a gun on a field gauge, it's not a good gun. Doesn't matter the amount of force it took me to close it. Like, yeah, if I put it in my 20-pound, my 12-pound press and like forced it close, but all I did was just rack it and then push it with my hand.
I mean, do I have to pull up the video again? It was like 2 light taps. That was it.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessary, but again, it's just, this is what you run into all the time is just, people that just want to be right so bad. Like, they'll give you $20.
That the decal is actually made out of Play-Doh, steel. So maybe that's what he's saying.
That was my all-time favorite, like Rob Ski comment. I know I've heard Gary say he can't make it through a Rob Ski video, but if you can make it through a Rob, if you can make it through a Rob Ski video, you get like little nuggets of gold. And one of them was he was doing one of the first reviews of the RSA 47. He goes, "This effing thing is made out of Play-Doh."
I watched it. I'm not saying he's got bad information. It's just something about his delivery.
No, absolutely not. Well, he's hard.
His cadence of speech is odd, and then of course he has his very strong accent as well. He does have kind of an interesting sense of humor too. So I find him funny, and I don't know what he's saying, and I find him funny.
Oh, I mean, I've been watching his videos for 10 years. Like, he had like his Wasser 10. He was doing like the 10,000 round videos. Like, this effing horde just won't die. I was like, okay. 10-4, Rob.
A hop for 545. He's just working down the calibers here. He says high round count shooters and AK shooters used to be synonymous in the 90s. These days AKs are for champagne socialists LARPing as proles. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I do think that it is almost hipster now to be the AK guy. It's not a thing anymore. It's almost a
hate it.
Guy. Yeah,
I hate it.
And I mean, Hop has made other comments about it that I've used in videos that I can't repeat on YouTube, but it's very funny.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very it turned in, like, I would say about 2020. It just like exploded. You know, like I saw parts kits go from $200 a pop to almost 400. You know, you saw the good.
Right about the time that Russian imports, Russian sanctions started.
Russian sanctions has very little to do with the majority of the Kalashnikov. I mean, think about where most of our Kalashnikovs come from: Romania, Bulgaria. Christ, I'm throwing Poland.
Okay, but most of the ammo came from the Tula factory. And
no, so if you look on a box of Tula, most of them will say like Ukraine, stuff like that.
Now they do.
Well, I'm just saying, if when you talk to people, like I don't have
a box anymore, so I can't argue with you. But okay,
no, I'm just saying, like, the cheap Russian ammo was a huge part of the market. But when you talk to the guys that import this stuff, they have backups. So there's always a contingency plan for when sanctions happen. So Red Army Standard, for example, comes from Romania, I believe. So there are plans, like when Tula can't import anymore, guess what? We bring Red Army Standard in, like,
Well, I remember people joking about that. Yeah, back when the pandemic happened, it was like, hey, they shut down this factory and then they opened one up just across the border, and it's like it's the exact same stuff.
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, it's they have all sorts of ways of getting around those things. Like right now, I know a guy personally. He sells Zenekos on his website in Russia. Calls himself Ivan the Bear. Great dude. He's figured out ways to get Zeneko into the country.
Yep.
I
almost bought one of this stuff, actually. It's funny that you brought him up. So
yeah, he's a great dude. He the first time I bought from him, he goes, "I'm going to give you a special present, my friend," and it was like a little fridge magnet with like two cats on it in Russian Navy uniforms grabbing each other's asses. Like gay Navy cats. I was just like, okay, Ivan, thank you.
yeah, I guess it's a little TMI.
I would have been fine without that magnet, but since you sent it, it's still on my refrigerator.
There you go. Andrew Vachon for $4.99. Thank you, sir. He says, being the anything other than an AR is hipster behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a true statement.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I don't. I'm going to skip what I was about to say, but let's just say a manufacturer was coming out with products that were doing exactly that, being just not AR enough, interesting, and just quote unquote inexpensive enough to be enticing to people because it's just barely not an AR. Yeah. There's a huge market for that now.
I'm trying to think of like the ACRs. Like if you came out with ACR like clones, I know the Jackal and all that stuff, but if you came out
that was what I was not going to mention, but then you brought it up right there.
No, I'm just saying, like that's like one of the main appeals of the Jackal is it's not an AR, Yeah. But at the same time, like, is it better than the AR? I don't. Even if it was a quality gun, I would say no.
No, I've owned 4 ACRs. The ACR is my favorite rifle. It's not great, but I do love it. So it's just one of those things where I accept that it's not great, but I do love it. So
Yeah, I had a couple Robinson arms. I don't know if you remember those.
yeah, absolutely. The XCR. Yeah.
Yep, I had a couple of those, and I used to run the bejesus out of them, but they were heavier and more cumbersome, and I hated shooting them sometimes. Like,
yeah, they shoot worse.
Yeah, when you've got about 5 hours on a range day shouldering a Robinson, you start, why am I doing this? I have a 5-pound AR at home.
Yeah. Well, there's something about just screws all over your gun that is a little disconcerting to me, because I remember on the ACR especially, I've had the rail screws that actually hold the internal steel rails on your receiver just come out during a range day.
That's no bueno.
So I would look at it and I'd be like, I'm missing these screws, like, and then I have to go to the hardware store and pick up, something that just matches it basically, because I was like, I'm missing stuff, and there's no way I'm finding it out here now.
I'm trying to think. I think it was Ian McCollum had a Blackthorn Industries had like an AR 180 like clone.
Okay.
And it actually had drywall screws in there holding it together.
Oh.
And he was just like, this is fantastic.
What?
Yeah, like
regular.
Yeah, they molded. If I remember correctly, it's been years since I've seen the video, but they molded it was a plastic lower. So they molded the plastic lowers like independently, and instead of like clamshelling them together and then using sonic welding to seal it, they just used a drywall screw at certain points to hold them together. And he's like, this was definitely money well spent.
Yeah. I mean, it can't get much cheaper than that.
No.
It was like 2-3 cents a piece or something. Jeez.
Hey, that's profit. That's cutting into the profits.
Well, and I bet that rifle wasn't cheap either.
I don't know. This was like early days of Forgotten Weapons and in range. We were talking like maybe 2011. So this was back in the day when they had no money. It's just one of the things that popped up. You said drywall screw. I'm just thinking of him just like taking this thing apart to see how unsafe this piece of crap is, and he pulls out drywall screws. He's like, "Okay, we are not shooting this under any circumstances."
Yeah. All right, let's. You sent me some stuff also about optics mounting, because I do want to get an AK, because one, I think it'll be fun content, and so you sent me some stuff for both optics and laser aiming modules, because this is one of Hop's biggest complaints, is the fact that to get everything you want on an AR is pretty easy, right? You're going to have your light off to the side, and the top rail is for your laser aiming module. It's away from the gas block. It doesn't get too hot, and you can mount your optics wherever you want. On an AK, you got side rails, you got rear sight blocks, you got cover mounts, and then you got gas block mounts, and you probably have a few others that I forgot to mention as well.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
So I'll start off with side rail mounts. I absolutely hate side rail mounts. Do they work? Sure. Do they return to zero? I guess.
Maybe.
But yeah, if you've there we go. So look at that bad boy bounce. So again, the receiver flexes like a rubber band after every shot, and you are mounting your optic to the thing that flexes like a rubber band. Is that really the best mounting pot? Does it return to zero? Sure. We've seen plenty of YouTube videos and plenty of people showing it. Henry at 9-Hole Reviews, he uses them, and he uses them very well. He's run them on his practical accuracy point course, flawlessly. They work. I just don't like it. Just knowing that it bounces that much it's just not for me. Dust cover mounts, they don't hold zero very well. I've yet to see a dust cover mount to hold very good zero, whether you're talking about the Zenicos, talking about the Texas dog legs, whether you're talking about the expensive Sure Shots, things like that. They just don't hold very well. So if you have, let's put this in perspective, if you have like a 3 to 4 MOA, 7.62 by 39, it probably does well enough to keep up with that gun. Because think about, you have a 3 to 4 MOA gun, and 7.62 by 39 by its nature really sucks at distance. Once you get past 300 yards, that thing drops like a freaking stone. I don't have the tables memorized anymore, but I think at 350 you drop at like 20 inches. At 400 yards it's like 40 inches, something like that. It's insane.
Well, actually, 400. Yeah, 400 is probably about 10 MOA to 12 MOA, depending on your exact setup. So yeah, it'd be about that, which is an AR's drop at 500 yards. So you're losing a lot of distance.
It's horrible, yeah. So so if you're using a dust cover mount on like a 7.62 by 39 gun, it probably does well enough holding zero to keep up with that gun. It's just if you're going to use it on something like 5.56 or 5.45 that does a little bit better distance, I think it's a terrible idea. And it doesn't matter how expensive it is. It's just the nature of dust cover mounts, because the majority of them mount, the primary mounting is at the rear side block. And then you're just kind of like locking it in somehow at the recoil tab. So it gets pretty loose. There's actually a small YouTuber who goes by the name Coke Man, who is a little bit out there, but he has a Midwest Industries rail system on one of his side folding arsenals. And when you fold the side folder, it completely pushes, the dust cover mount like probably 2 to 3 millimeters to the right every time you close.
Really?
Yeah, it's bad. So it's like that's what you're relying your zero on, is something that can move that much just by closing your stock. So I'm just not a big fan of dust covers. When you get into things like the rail chassis systems, like the Midwest Industries rail chassis, Zeneco rail chassis, things like that, the way those things mount to the gun is, so the Zenecos pioneered this and the Midwest Industries just kind of copied it. I meant to show you a video, but like the Zenecos the instructions are the most Russian that you are ever going to find, where it just says hit it with a fucking hammer. So if you go to like Zeneco's like English instructions, literally it's this very beautiful young lady named Anastasia holding it, while her friend hits it with a hammer.
I thought that was her mom.
What's that?
I thought that was her mom. It's awesome.
No,
the channel is amazing.
He's hot, but just hitting it with a hammer just to force form that aluminum into the steel trunnion. All right, and then you're just using the handguard retainer just kind of like stabilize the front. So does it work? Yeah, it works, but I've had it to where like I've put one of those on Romanian Wasser 10, and just because of the difference in the trunnion, it just made the whole handguard shift, clock like I'd say probably 5 to 10 degrees to the right. So now you're mounting all your optics based on that lopsided.
Right. So now everything
is now off. Right. So, if you can get to go on straight, fine, but that's a big if.
Well, now is that a one-time solution too? So if
you're not moving that thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of money to drop on something that may come off a little cockeyed.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not a big fan of the Zenecos for that reason. I've had 3 full Zeneco systems. I'm not a big fan. The Midwest Industry, I haven't had my hands on one, but it looks like like they just cloned that system. So I'm not a fan. I don't like Midwest Industries to begin with. So the chassis systems like that, I'll call it the force forged formed systems. I'm not a big fan. Going to be attaching to the handguard. Anytime I see Hop's name, I want to read it because I love what he has to say.
I know, and he's used the Midwest, and I remember him saying something about how many screws are holding it together, because it's like 2, 3, 4 different pieces, something like that, and then one of the rail sections didn't have the right undercut on it or something. Or maybe that was a different that he was talking about, but
no, he's yeah. So the way the system works, especially on the Zenecos that they copied, is you have the rail and then you got a bunch of holes in the side, and then any accessories you want, you put the top, the B9, I think it's B19U, you put that into the rail, and then you use flathead screws in there, and that's how you keep it in place. So it's pretty sketchy.
Yeah, and again, this stuff the AK isn't cheap to begin with anymore.
No.
these accessories are not cheap, because I mean the full rail systems go for like what, $600-700 for some of the top end ones.
Yeah, the Sure Shot is the big hotness right now. So I have a Sure Shot. They have the Mark II and the Mark III.
Is this
I didn't.
the Sure Shot
No,
here?
that's a Occam Defense. I'll get into that one in a minute here.
Okay.
But like the Sure Shots are the big hotness right now. It's the one that's like, you know, hyper beast. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to look cool on Instagram with their, you know, Sure Shot rail systems. Again, they use a dust cover mount too. It's not great. I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, they're losing zero. I bought one just because, you know, the guy selling it's a nice guy. I don't want to like trash his company. You know, he's a small company. He's just trying to get off the ground. I don't want to trash the dude without like at least getting my hands on the product. But he's got a Mark III that's the full dust cover rail, and then he's got like a Mark II, which just has like, it just goes like 3 inches past the rear side block. So I got the Mark II because that probably has the best option for holding zero, but there's no like real good mounting in those things. It's just basically a series of set screws that just kind of like are putting tension on like the rear sight block, the barrel, things like that, and that's what's holding it in place. And
That sounds nightmarish.
it was about a 20-minute install. I've talked to people that tried to install it and it took them like a couple hours, stuff like that. So it's not, I don't know. Now let's make a distinction here. So this guy is making them in America. He basically took data packs from Russia. They have Russian ones. You know, Sure Shot is originally a Russian design. I've talked to people that have the original Russian ones, and there's actually, their instructions have you drilling and tapping the mounting block at, you know, into the rear sight block. So you have the rear sight block and the mounting block. You're actually like drilling and tapping into the rear sight block to keep it from rotating left and right. You know, the American ones don't do that because we don't like to, you know, we don't know how to use tools, essentially. You know, if we can't do it with an Allen wrench, we're not interested, you know. So, you know, those set screws, just in my opinion, I haven't like done a full testing on mine, but it just seems to me like those set screws just aren't enough to hold it and keep it from rotating left and right. So, you know, I'm going to run.
It sounds off. And like you said, when you drill and tap, like it's locked
solid,
in.
Yeah. So the people that have the Russian ones with the drill and tap instructions are phenomenal. You know, they could throw it, you know, run over it with their car and it's fine. But I've been hearing a lot of people say that they're having problems with the Sure Shot USA ones, and you know, you're going to spend $500 to $700 for something that, you know, just being held together by a bunch of set screws.
Right.
Again, I don't want to make that claim. I don't have the proper trigger time on it to say that it's no bueno, but it's, to me, there's enough people out there saying it's no bueno that I would be a little bit skeptical. That's just me.
Especially when you're throwing around big money. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So then we get into the Occam, which is the picture you just had up. So the Occam, the Occams run, I've had about 5 of these bad boys now. The Occams run about $300, $320, and he offers free shipping. Occam Defense is ran by this guy named Brian, who's a super dude. He is a fantastic human being. He hates Instagram. He hates social media. You'll never see him doing like sizzle reels. You know, he doesn't answer DMs. He just sits in the shop and makes fantastic products. So this thing is pretty cheap, but you have to make permanent modifications to your weapon to put it on, which you can do with just a Dremel if you really absolutely needed to. I would recommend just buying a press. A press is like $80 at Harbor Freight.
I use a drill press. They're not expensive.
No, not a drill press. I'm talking like a hydraulic press.
Oh, hydraulic press, okay.
Yeah, you don't even need a drill press for it. You need to remove the front sight. You need to remove the handguard retainer, and you need to remove the rear sight block to get this thing to go. So you can Dremel them off. I've done it before just to see how bad it is. It's not terrible. And the installation is pretty straightforward. It'll take about 10 minutes. And it's a free float monolithic rail, you know, and it is fantastic. I put this on my PSA Gen 3 when I had it, and I was getting 1 MOA with it, which is
nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can get 1 MOA with one of those rifles if your gun is properly gassed and you have a nitride barrel with a 1 in 9.5 twist. You know,
Yeah, and that's just removing, the pretension, the load, the harmonic issues with having a non-free floated rail on there.
Correct, and it's fantastic. Brian over at Occam, he was obsessed with sub MOA AKM just to see if he could do it, and he achieved it. He has a sub MOA AKM. Now, again, it's a round that sucks after 300 yards. So,
having more accuracy is nice, right? It is just nice to have, because even if you're shooting like an 8 or a 10-inch steel at 200 yards, if your gun is 1 MOA, that's much easier to do repeatedly than something that's shooting 3 to 4 MOA base, right? Before we even get into drop or wind or anything like that.
Right. Now, again, let's go over the bad points of this. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect when it comes to Kalashnikovs. So the first thing is height over bore. That is a very high height over bore. I mean, it's not insane, but if you're going to mount a laser to that, you definitely want to mount a laser over the bore because the rest of that is M-LOK, right? So if you mount a laser on it, you got to have an optic that has enough,
Ooh, yeah, good point.
You're going to need an optic that has enough vertical elevation to get in there. So I've tried it with an MRO, and MRO failed miserably. It didn't have enough vertical elevation to get on target. Holosun worked, and Aim Point Micro worked, and an Aim Point Pro worked. But if you're going to use something other than like a Holosun Aim Point or Aim Point Pro, it might not work. You might not have enough vertical elevation to get on target.
Yeah, I mean, you might need to get to like another aftermarket riser or something to bump it up just a little bit.
Yep. And then the second issue that I'm going to mention is, if you mount at the very rear of that, so right above where the ejection port cover is, that like lasts like 3 inches.
Yep.
If you mount your optic to that, you will not hold zero. Like I've had this happen on 2 different Occam rails, to where I mounted to the very, what I call the rear of the tail, and my grouping at 25 yards was like 4 or 5 inches. No idea what's going on with that. I don't know if it's just the harmonics or what, but all I had to do was just move it up to where that optic is sitting right now, and it took care of the problem. I shrunk my groups down to like a 1/2 inch.
That's interesting. I wonder. So it's mounted right back here in the back, right next to the front trunnion.
Yep, right where the rear sight block should be.
So I wonder if it has some play as it's shooting, and so when you mount it all the way back on the tail, it actually has like more deflection as the rail is moving. Plus, that's a pretty thin piece of aluminum in the back. So under high speed, I wonder if you can actually kind of see it wobble a little bit under high speed.
That's a very good possibility, but again, I've had like 4 or 5 of these things now, and it happened on 2 of them, so I just don't mount there.
I got you. Yeah,
I just mount up there. Now, again, it's not perfect, but for the money, you're talking $300. So if you buy like a $700 Wasser 10 and one of these for $320, you got $1,000 into the gun. You got a free float barrel. It's a good option. It's a good gun.
I mean, that's not terrible for $1,000 out the door.
No, not at all.
And now a question about the M-LOK. Is the M-LOK up front actually usable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Perfect.
Now you're talking about, at the, what is that? The
3, 6, and 9, basically.
Yeah, all that M-LOK is 100% usable. Now, I don't know why you'd want to use the M-LOK at the top. Now, as far as heat, it does handle heat pretty well. I've mag dumped about 4 magazines out of one of these things, and that's when I started feeling the heat. But it's not terrible. All you got to do is just put some sort of wrap on it, and it's fine.
Yeah, the only thing that I notice about it is it looks like a pretty tall rail, like it's the same height as the receiver, basically. So if you're doing your normal like C clamp, you might need a little bit bigger hands to get around there.
Yeah, like I got that angled grip, and I usually just run just a simple ladder cover on top there, and I can C clamp it just fine.
I got baby hands though, so I got issues.
I got little hands.
Yeah. Now, have you tried lasers and stuff on this? Do they hold 0 at the front of the rail?
Yep. I have not had. I just use cheap Holosun lasers. I don't get too like crazy with it. So even the cheap Holosuns hold pretty decent 0 with this thing.
Yeah, because you got the 321, right? That's the one.
Yeah, I got a couple of those just because they're cheap.
Yeah, I mean they're the cheapest. well, not necessarily the cheapest, but the cheapest laser from a manufacturer that does what it's supposed to do without a full power illuminator. That's kind of the thing that holds it back.
It's got aluminum housing and a pretty solid riser on it. That, again, I'm putting these things on Kalashnikov, so I like that solid mount just to absorb the heat.
Yeah. All right, and what's the one that we got on here? This is
that's a Zenico.
This is the Zenico. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the Zenico. Hammer it in with the hammer, and then you just screw everything in, and then it works.
Right. All right, and then this is kind of like the one that you showed me. You sent me the pictures of, because you got the biddy mount in the back. That's the one.
Yep. So I use a biddy mount, and that's those are the aim point risers. So I think the aim point risers go for, if you buy them from Aim Point, they're like $80, but you can find them on eBay for like 40, 50, something like that. Now that is a biddy mount with the micro footprint. So you can get the pick tinny ones for the same price, and you can use whatever optic mount comes with your, your red dot. So if you bought like a Hollow Sun, it's going to have like a Absolute Co-Witness riser in there. You can use that with the pick rail. So again, that's Aim Point footprint, just because that's what I had. But if you're going to just buy something new, I would recommend the pick rail one, just because if they still make it. I don't know if they still make it or not.
Right. Well, that way there you can just put on whatever you want. You don't need to be married into something.
Right, exactly. So I just use that for my optic, and then I just use an Ultimac for my laser. And again, I'm all in probably like 175, 180, and I've got an optic and I've got a rail. Now,
you can kind of mount yourself. What do you do for the light?
The light I usually just use. Midwest Industry makes like a Ford clamp, like a rail clamp. I just usually use that. Gotcha. Those things usually cost like $50, but I mean, I've stacked everything on the Ultimac before. I've stacked the light, the switch, or I'm sorry, I stacked the light, the optic, the laser. I just put the switch on the side. I've done it before. It's stupid as shit looking, and it makes the gun extremely front heavy, but you can do it, and it works. You can even, like, I've had it to where I've had the optic on the front rail, and then I put a magnifier all the way at the back. I mean, you're talking, I measured, I think it was like a 9-inch difference.
Well, it's the one behind you there in the background.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So you got like a 9-inch difference, and it's still a usable magnifier setup. It's fine. Now again, people critique like, well, that Ultimac's going to heat up and cook your optic. Like, yeah, it heats up, but no, it won't cook your optic. I mean, unless you're doing like some stupid mag dumping, if you're just like dumping mags in the trash, yeah, you'll probably cook something, but just take it off. Take it off.
Right. I think a regular guy training, he did like 20,000 rounds on a gas tube mount on one of his Hollow Sun units, and little Hollow Sun red dot, and it survived. I mean, I think it probably depends on what, like if you put some super cheap, really crappy optic on there, you might have issues. But
I mean, me being an old school Kalashnikov guy, I've had SAR-1, which is a Romanian gun, with an Ultimac and a Bushnell TR-25 or whatever, the old $50 ones. I've like mag dumped like 5-6 magazines, and that thing was still kicking. Hey,
there you go.
Yeah. The only optic I've ever personally seen have an issue with the Ultimac was the older EOTechs, where the battery compartments were like low. We were doing a class, and this guy started having malfunctions with his EOTech. He had it mounted on his Ultimac, and all we did, we just took it off, kind of cooled it off, and we put it back on. The only thing we could figure is like the proximity of the battery pack to the heat was messing with the optic. That's the only issue I've ever personally seen.
Well, I wonder if that had like an automatic shut off for like heat or something.
It very well could have been. Yeah,
interesting. All right, so to end it, if we're gonna go, bump the mic. If I'm gonna go get an AK, that's a decent value. You got to go to Gunbroker, and you basically got to go find a Wasser 10 in decent condition for roughly $700.
Yeah, I mean, further question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Into that, what about getting an unconverted Russian like a Vepr or a Saiga?
So the Veprs are basically carbine RPKs. So you can get one of those. They're just extremely heavy, and they're not compatible with pretty much any aftermarket parts, just because of the size of the barrel. So it's actually an RPK barrel that's on there with an RPK bulge trunnion and a 1.5 millimeter receiver. So I've had Veprs. They're amazing, but they are heavy and they're not compatible with anything. Zeneco makes some parts that are compatible, but good luck getting that. You got to go talk to Ivan and do some smuggling. So it's not really now the Segias are essentially Russian 100 series. Buy 3 Wassers. Yeah. But then you have 3 shitty guns. But anyway, so
well, my point is I just want something that I can actually kind of semi-modernize. I just want optics, I want a laser aiming module, and I want a light on it, and probably a sling somehow as well. If I can do all those things, I can deal with the extra weight, the recoil, the other AK intricacies. But just to get something that can get me out of the door and make it to 5,000 to 10,000 rounds, right?
Yeah, I mean, a Wasser 10 or even an RH10 will do that just fine. RH10 you'll pay about $100 less. The only difference between the Wasser 10 and the RH10 is the barrel profile. So the barrel profile on the RH10 is a little bit slimmer, so you get a thinner barrel, and you get a gas block front sight combo with a hooded front sight. Okay, so if you're going to run like a low optic, that hood's going to get in the way. But if you're going to run like a higher optic, like an absolute co-witness, it's not going to get in your way. It's no big deal.
Gotcha. Interesting.
But it is going to be fully gassed. You're going to talk about a 4 millimeter gas port, that's going to be a stout boy to shoot. Just something to keep in mind. It's the nice thing about the Wassers and the RH10s is it's something you can grow with because the core parts are good.
Right.
So you buy it, it'll probably have mag wobble. It'll probably have a shitty finish. It'll probably have a canted front sight. The furniture it comes with is going to be total dog shit. Go to Atlantic Arms. They have a black poly furniture kit for like $60. Spend $60 upgrade the furniture kit. No big deal. So you're going to get a gun that's not going to be great out of the box. You have to put a little work into it. But the core parts are solid. So if you have solid core parts, you can work with everything else. You can fix, bad finish, spray paint it. Canted front sight, you're probably going to be running optics.
Yep.
Mag wobble, it'll probably still work. If it doesn't work, it's $15 to fix it. You can buy a new mag release tab and a rivet for $15, and you can change it with a drill, a hammer. It's pretty easy.
You make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. You can fix everything on that gun because it has good core parts.
Mm-hmm. Sweet, which is kind of what I'm looking for. Something that I can, like you said, grow with, work on it, have fun with it, and just actually use it as intended, basically.
Yeah. Now the WBPs, jack rifles, are about $300 more, and it has better finish, and it probably has a less mag wobble. So if that extra $300 is worth the finish and a little bit more refinement, cool, but it's not worth it to me.
Right. Well, that's kind of my camp too, because I'm like, I'm not like actually into the AK, but I think it will be a fun experiment and something to do, something different. So for me, it's like $300. I'd rather spend more money on the ammo than
exactly. That's always been my point because
I'm going to treat it like crap anyway. So I don't care if the finish is bad. I don't care if the furniture that I'm going to swap out for something that takes optics, like a canted front sight block, doesn't matter, right? I'm going to be running a red dot or something like that on it.
Yeah. So what I tell everybody is if the gun is chambered in 7.62 x 39. There's no point in paying anything more than you have to, because there's nothing you can do to that gun to improve the performance of 7.62 x 39. It's not 5.56. You can't like change the twist rate. You can't change the barrel length. You can't change the weight of the bullet and get a different performance. 7.62 x 39, no matter what you do, is still going to suck past 300 yards. So you can have a 20-inch barrel or a 12-inch barrel. You're going to get the same performance. You could have a 1 in 10 twist barrel, or you could have a 1 in 9.5. It's still going to suck past 300 yards. This is a guy who spent $3,000 on a Meridian Defense AKM, and guess what? It still sucked donkey balls past 300 yards. So putting more money into a 7.62 x 39 gun is completely pointless. So if you can spend $700 for a Wasser and get what you need, spend that extra money on ammo.
Yep. And that's what I want to do. I'm actually one of those people that does shoot it. So, and that's what I do for my job. So I get paid to shoot it. So
Nice.
all right. All right. So any final thoughts before we close out here, gentlemen?
No, I mean, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Anytime I can sit down and bullshit about Kalashnikovs, I'm game.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on. I learn a lot because I know nothing. So just listening to you talk and explain things is great. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in the audience from my audience who are not as Kalashnikov focused. So I think we all really appreciate it. So thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Gary, you got anything?
I do. Hey, Richard, can you go ahead and drop the Discord link again real quick? Next week, we're going to run through some viewer loadouts. So if you could, pretty please, drop a picture and a description of your loadout in the Discord when Richard finally decides to link it. And John and I will go through it, and we'll see what we can do. We'll see what you got.
Real quick, Gary was asking about Segias, right? You're asking about Segias?
I was asking, I found a really nice unconverted Ismosh on Gunbroker for about $1,000. It seems like it might be a way to go. Maybe.
Yeah, in my opinion, the Segias are the best Kalashnikovs coming in the country, just because they are essentially the AK-100 series, which is the military grade Kalashnikovs. They came off the same assembly line as the guns that they use in the Russian military. The only difference is you have to convert them, which, if I'll be straight up, if you buy it, I'll convert it for you, myself, just pay for parts, just because.
How hard is that to do?
Not very hard for me. It'll probably take about 90 minutes.
90 minutes?
Yeah. So it's like, you just pay for parts and I'll do all the work. I don't care. I just love working on Kalashnikovs.
Right on.
A man of passion.
Yeah. Like, I'm not in this for the money, I don't do builds for people usually because, what I find is people say, hey, I want to, what do I need? And I say, well, you need this, you need that, you need this. Like, well, I saw this YouTube video that says I need that. It's like, yeah, right. You listen to the YouTube, not the guy that's been living and breathing Kalashnikovs for 21 years,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone once again for showing up, and everybody in the chat, thank you very much. And everyone watching this later, I appreciate you. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.